Okay, so we're heading into week 7 of fantasy football, and obviously the NFL season. This season's going quick, that's for sure. And this is a must-win week for a lot of teams. If you're 1-5 or 2-4, you got to pull this out. And I'm 2-4 in a couple leagues. But anyway, this is what we got to do this week. You want to trade some guys, sell them high. These are guys you're going to sell high. The number one guy is Kenyon Drake. He exploded last night versus the Dallas Cowboys. But in garbage time, had a 70-yard run when the game was over and they were just trying to run the clock out. And Dallas can't even stop that. So Drake, he had a monster fantasy performance with 28 fantasy points in standard scoring leagues. Drake, though, he's been bad the whole year. He didn't look good again in this game except 2 or 3 runs at the end of the game when that Dallas defense was taxed. Kyle Murray is their number one running option, to be honest. Again, he had 70 yards rushing, is Murray. Chase Edmonds, he got, I would say, about 30% of the snaps, and he's more there passing downs back. So Drake coming off a big game. He's got Seattle coming up and then the bye. So if you could get something good for Drake, this is the time to sell him high, because I think last night would be his best fantasy game of the season for sure. So if you could sell Drake, this is the week to do it. The number 2 guy, Julio Jones, he's been banged up most of the season, but he came back with a huge game with 2 touchdowns. And you could get a lot for him right now. You know, his stock skyrocketed. He came out of this game with no injury. The hamstring, I guess, is fine. Even though Julio Jones, he looks slow to me. But he still got the job done. He got 2 touchdowns. He's got Detroit coming up this week, a good matchup. And maybe you could get a number 2 or 3 receiver and a low end or high 2 running back for Julio Jones. So if you got Jones and your team is struggling or you're under 500, this is a good week to trade him coming off a monster game. Jones, he could get hurt anytime, especially with the hammy. A lot of miles on his body. He's been around a long time. Obviously, he's an elite receiver, but he's definitely a guy I would sell high on. It's Julio Jones. The third guy is Will Fuller, getting a lot of targets. Watson's finding him. He's the number 1 over there in Houston. But you know, that other shoe's going to drop eventually with Will Fuller. A lot of injuries in his career, a lot of nick-up and bang-ups. And I don't know if Fuller could last the whole season. Right now, he's putting up borderline 1, high 2 receiver numbers. But if you could overvalue Will Fuller and trade him, I definitely will. Because Fuller, I just have a feeling he's going to get hurt. And if you could get something good, like I said, you need a running back. Fuller's probably a 2 or 3 receiver right now. You definitely go out there and trade Will Fuller if you could. Another guy to sell high on, coming off probably his best performance of the year and name recognition, Rob Gronkowski. A lot of people probably have held on to him because of the name. Unfortunately, I dropped him last week in a few leagues because his production was nothing. His best game in PPR coming into last week was 8 points, which is nothing. And before that, he had a couple low-point games. But now, Gronk back on the radar. He's got Las Vegas this week, coming up. But if you could trade Rob Gronkowski off his name recognition and stuff, I definitely will. And that you could get better tight ends out there, or maybe a low-end running back. So if you could trade Gronkowski and get something good, this is the week to do it, because I think this might be his best game of the year. 80 yards and a touchdown, I believe he had. So yeah, go out there and trade Gronk. Teams are going to be in a pinch to get a tight end, especially with Zach Ertz and Jonnu Smith hurt now. And on the waiver wire, some leagues, there's probably not many guys on there that can help you. So go trade Gronk if you can and try to get something decent for him. And the 5th guy to sell high on, even though I have him in a few leagues and I don't think I'm going to sell high on him and just roll with him, is Ronald Jones. He's playing like an RB1 now. In the last 3 weeks, he's gone over 100 yards in each game. So Ronald Jones, he's been very good. And this week he's got the Raiders, whose defense gets shredded on the ground. So Jones could have a big game, but just the only thing I'm thinking, Leonard Fournette, he's going to get healthy soon enough. And I don't think Tampa Bay signed him to sit on the bench. I could see Fournette cutting in a little and getting 8 to 10 carries. We saw McCoy on the field for about 30% of the snaps. So once Fournette comes back, which could be this week, I would be a little worried about Ronald Jones and Fournette cutting into the work. But he's 5th on my priority list to sell high, because Jones, he can help a lot of teams right now, and he's getting the catches too. He's ran for 100 yards the last 3 games, like I said. So he'd be on the bottom of my list to try to sell unless you get blown away with an offer. So these are top 5 guys I would sell high right now this week.